So today we're going to write and graph linear equations. Our essential question is, what are the important pieces of information needed to write or graph a linear equation? So a linear equation, let's write that down, is a straight line. And essentially what it really is, it's a relationship between two quantities that have a constant rate of change. I'm going to underline rate of change because this is really just our slope, what we've been finding the last couple days. The rate of change is just your slope. Okay, so when we're using equations today to talk about the relationship between two quantities, our two quantities that we are talking about, let's draw a little arrow over here, are our x and our y. Okay, so something is being done to x to give us our y value. That's the relationship happening. So when we talk about linear equations, we are using slope-intercept form. And slope-intercept form is the equation y equals mx plus b. So you should remember that equation. And let's go ahead and identify the different pieces of it. So let me slide this up. So y equals mx plus b, where m is going to be our slope that we've been finding with graphs and with 2 points. And our b, this number that's at the end of our equation, is going to be our y-intercept. And our y-intercept is just where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, so it's where it crosses the y-axis. So if it crosses the y-axis, it's going to be the point where x is going to be 0, and then we're going to have a number for y. That's going to be where it crosses, okay, is where x equals 0. So x is going to be 0 at that point, okay? So there are some steps that we're going to write. And before we get to the steps, let's go ahead and write our slope formula as well. So we know that slope is our rate of change. And we also said that it was rise over run, or y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So that was our equation that we were using to find the slope. So if we don't know the slope, we can find it by using that formula. Okay, so our steps to write equations from a graph, let's go ahead and do that. Steps to write equations from a graph. Okay, so here's our steps. So step 1, we need to know the y-intercept. So we're going to find the y-intercept because this is going to be our b value for our equation. That's the number that we're going to put right here in the b. So number 2, we're going to find the slope. Now we're going to find our slope either by counting our rise over our run if we have a graph, or we can do it with find it with the slope formula using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so we're going to find the slope, and that is going to become our m value, the number that goes right in front of the x, our slope. And our final step is to write the equation as y equals mx plus b, using the b value and the m value that we found in steps 1 and 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at your homework and do a couple of those problems, then we'll come back and add to our notes. I'm going to set my notes to the side. And looking at number 1, it says write the slope-intercept form of the equation of each line y equals mx plus b. So we need to know what the b value is and the m value. Okay, so those are the two things we're finding. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and look at our graph and find the y-intercept. So we're looking for, here's my y-axis right here. We want to see where that line crosses the y-axis. So we can see that it's right here. I'm going to put a dot there. Okay, that's where it crosses. So that means that at the point 0, 3, it crosses the y-axis. So this is the point 0, 3 that it crosses. So our b value is just going to be the y. So b is going to be 3. And it's a positive 3 because it's above the x-axis. Next, we're going to find our slope. So to find our slope, we have to find another point on that line and use our slope triangle to count our rise over our run. So going along this line, I have another point right here. I'm going to highlight it in green. And my slope triangle is down and over. So I went down 2 units. So that's my rise. It was -2. I went down 2 over 1 unit. So there's my slope. I can also just write it as -2. I don't have to write the 1 at the bottom. So now I know my b value and I know my m value. So I'm going to go ahead and write my equation. So my equation is going to be y equals, here it is, mx plus b. So m is -2, x, I have to leave my x there, plus 3, because that's my b value. So this is my equation for number 1. So we're going to repeat the process and do number 2. Now number 2 looks a little bit different because my line is a vertical line going straight up and down. Looking back at your notes from a couple days ago, try and determine what is the slope of a line that goes straight up and down. So let me flip back in my notes and let's look at it. So we said in our notes, if it goes up, it's positive, down is negative, it's straight horizontal, it's 0, and up and down is undefined. So this line does not have a slope. So going back to our problem, we do not have a slope for this one. So my m value is undefined. Okay. Now look at my y-axis. Do I have this line crossing my y-axis at all? Nope, it looks like they're parallel. So my b, I don't have anything there. It's not 0 either. It's just nothing. We don't have a y-intercept. So this one's a little bit trickier because we're not going to have a y value and we don't have a slope. But look at this line. At x equals 1, it crosses the x-axis. At x equals 1 here, it crosses the x-axis, and here, and here, and here. So in this equation, our final equation is just x is equal to 1, because the entire line, x is equal to 1. It never changes. So this is a special circumstance here for this graph. Okay, you'll see another one on number 3 that goes side to side, but see if you can find out, you're still going to have a intercept where it crosses right here, And you're still going to have a slope on this one. So number 3, I think you can figure out based on the notes that you were given. See if you can try it on your own and then try the other 3 problems on that page. Let's go back to our notes. The second part of today's assignment is to find, or actually graph, a line given an equation. Okay. Oops, wrong notes. Let me flip back. So we are going to graph. So these are the steps to graph a line from an equation. Okay. So to do that, we still need the same pieces of information. We need to know the slope. We need to know the intercept. So the first thing we're going to do, given the equation, is to plot the y-intercept, or the b value from the equation. The second step is to use the slope to find another point on the line. The third step is to repeat that. Repeat step 2 to find some more points on the line, because the more points you have, the easier it is to draw your line. And then the final step is to draw your line, use a straight edge, and then you're going to end it with arrows on either side, because this line is going to go on and on forever, in either direction. Okay, so you have to have your arrows. It doesn't just draw a little segment and stop. So let's go ahead and look at your homework, the second page of your homework, and draw some of these out. So number 7, we have y equals x minus 3. So we need to identify a few things. We need to know what the m value is, because remember we're using y equals mx plus b. We need to know the m value, or the slope. We also need to know the y-intercept. So given this equation, my m value is going to be right here. Notice in this equation there is not a number there, but we know that if there's no number, it's going to have an implied 1 right here. So there's a 1. And then for our b value, it's going to be this entire thing. So the negative, or the subtraction sign, is going to be included in the b value. So this is my b, this is my m. Okay, so I know that m is going to be equal to 1, my slope is 1, my b value is negative 3. So I'm going to identify those first. So step 1 was to plot the y-intercept, or the b value, on your graph. So if b is negative 3, this means that it crosses the y-axis, which is the vertical, at negative 3. So I'm going to go down here to negative 3 and put a dot. So that's the first dot on my line. From there, I'm going to use my slope to find my next point. So 1 is my slope, which is still 1 over 1. So I like it as a fraction because I can count it out a little bit easier. So if it's 1 over 1, I'm going up 1 and over 1 and putting a dot. I can repeat the process, up 1 and over 1 and put a dot. From there, I can go ahead and draw my line. So notice that it's at every single corner for this one. So when I set up my ruler, I want to make sure my ruler also goes through all of those points. So I can draw a nice line. Remember to make it large enough that you can see all the points through that entire graph, and then put arrows on either end. Now number 8, again, we want to identify our slope and our b value. So my slope, m, is always going to be your rate of change, which is right in front of the x. So my slope is going to be negative 1 over 4. My b value, look at here. Do I have anything for my b? There's nothing there. So because there's nothing there, it's going to be a 0. Okay, so this would be plus, like a plus 0 right here. So when I go to graph this, my b value is 0. So it crosses the y-axis at 0. So I'm going to start right there at the origin. My slope is negative 1/4. Now I prefer to put the negative at the top. So that's telling me if I'm going up or down. And since it's negative, I'm going down. So down 1 and then over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 for my slope. Now, if you wanted a point going the other direction, this is the same thing as, let me switch it over so you can see, same thing as 1 over negative 4. So that negative can either live with the 1 or it can live with the 4, either one. If I looked at it the second way, 1 over negative 4, I would go up 1 and to the left negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. See how that gives me another point on my line? And it's the same thing, it's just going the other direction. So my line for number 8 is going to go through all 3 of those points. Again, I made my line long enough to go through the entire graph, and then I'm going to put my arrows at either end. Okay, so continue with number 9, 10, 11, and 12. I want you to go ahead and identify the m value and the b value of both of those before you go ahead and graph it. Okay, so identify what the slope is, identify the y-intercept, and then go ahead and graph.